alternative. You only want to record part of it, do you?
Well, I might not be here all day, so I don't want to commit to recording the whole thing if I'm not. But
right. Okay. If you want to record them where you're sat.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So, just in terms of procedure, we deal with what matter 3 issue 2 this morning, and then matter 7 on monitoring this afternoon. So this morning we anticipate that we will take a break about 11:30. And we anticipate that we will deal with issue 2 by lunchtime. Matter 7 will start at 2 o'clock. Program will start at 2 o'clock this afternoon. I know not everyone's staying for matter 7. This morning I'm leading the session, and this afternoon Dudley will be leading this afternoon session. But questions can come from either of us, both of us taking part in each session. Before we start, just that as we have done at the end of every block, we would like a catch up with the council regarding the action list. So that's the action, just catching up on actions that were agreed from the previous blocks, and then any actions that we agree today, just so that when we leave, it's clear who is responsible for what. Okay. That is not part of the hearing session, but will take place here after the conclusion of the session today, and anybody who wishes to stay and observe is welcome to. Before we start, I'm just going to ask Mr. Humphries whether there's anything that the council wishes to bring to our attention.
No, nothing arising since we were last year inspectors.
So, 5-year supply position. So we're dealing with issue 2, question 39. And we have amended the matters, issues, questions relating to this issue from that originally set out in light of the revised information that the council put before us in July relating to housing land supply. So we're dealing with questions A, B, C and D of question 39. We will deal with 5-year supply first. That's questions 39A, 39B and 39C. We may jump around a little bit when we go through them, and then we'll come on to D, which is looking at the period beyond 5 years for the main plan period. Just a couple of things to say in terms of the discussion. This is dealing with supply. I know that reference has been made to requirement of particularly unmet need. We have dealt with that previously in early sessions, so I don't expect us to be able to go into that. So I know that has been referenced in some of the statements, but we've already heard evidence on that. And secondly, in the session 2 weeks ago, when we went through strategic and non-strategic allocations, we did look at the trajectory on each of those allocations, and some of you present were able to contribute to that. I recognise that that didn't apply to everyone, you were here, and no table would be made a comment on the site. So I don't want people to make the same comments that they made before, because we've noted those. So if you haven't made a comment on the site because you weren't here, then we're happy to hear anything you can say. But we've also got what we've written down as well. That's okay. Yeah. Thank you. So, 5-year supply, and And the first question, will there be a 5-year supply of specific deliverable sites from the intended date of adoption of the plan? I'm going to start with just asking the council, just if they can please just update us as to where we are on 5-year supply, where the council is at in relation to 5-year supply, because we're in a different situation to where we were on submission. I think the position you're saying in that you consider there is a 5-year supply is the same, but the data and the way in which you are asking us to look at the data has changed. I wonder whether you could just bring us up to date on that, and also then, so we've got it before us at the start, explain to us the suggested modifications that you're now asking us to consider that you've set out in here. So that's okay, just provide an overview.
Yeah, so I'll pick that up. So the most up-to-date position is as contained in core document 31, the examination library. So that is the most up-to-date and detailed information on housing land supply. And then what we sought to do in our matter statement in response to this question is draw out the key points from that, but the bulk of evidence is in that rather lengthy document. And just to give you a reference, and if you're going by the PDF, page 16 of CD31 is where you have the summary, as it were, of the position, not just for 5 years, but looking forward across the plan period. There's a summary table there that's very useful to have reference to. In terms of 5-year supply, yes, as you've already indicated, our position remains that we have a 5-year housing land supply, and we're conscious that there's quite a lot of comments that have been made in this regard, but we're fairly comfortable that however you slice the various issues that have been raised, the end result still ends up with us having a 5-year housing land supply. So one of the issues that's raised today is what's the relevant base date for considering looking at 5-year housing land supply. And in essence, as we sit here today, we're halfway between two April 1st monitoring periods. And so what we've done is provided you with 5-year housing land supply calculated by reference to both the 1st of April 24 base date and 1st of April 25 base date, so that you have confidence that whenever it is the plan ends up being adopted. So we would say if it ends up being before April next year, then it's appropriate to use 1st of April of this year as the base date, because that's the most relevant sort of 5-year monitoring period. But if it post-dates out, then we shift into the next year. But either way, the result is the same. We still have a 5-year housing land supply, and we provided you with the information to demonstrate that by reference to evidence in relation to sites and the mathematics of how the different calculations work. And I'm sure we'll go through those in due course. In terms of the latest evidence, as you'll have seen explained in our matter statement, Council underwent at the beginning of the year various inquiries into a number of large schemes within its area, and at all of those was discussion of 5-year housing land supply. But in essence, things have moved on since those inquiries have taken place, because the council has undertaken additional evidence gathering by sending pro formas, engaging in correspondence with the developers and promoters of, in essence, all of the sites that nearly enough all of the sites that make up the supply, and you have the outcome of that exercise in that core document 31, hence why that is the most up-to-date piece of information you have before you in relation to 5-year housing land supply. And it's based on that document that we'd ask you to consider the question of 5-year housing land supply. Now, in terms of main modifications, I think the main one to draw to your attention is, we've suggested, but I think this is probably a point that's worth discussion during the course of the day, consideration of the spec trajectory. So what our information, or rather evidence shows, is that we have a supply that exceeds our needs over the planned period. So we calculate the oversupply as being 11.75%. And obviously we had a discussion earlier in the examination about buffer, our headroom, however you want to call it in that regard. But we're confident that we have more than sufficient capacity to meet the needs identified in the plan. And what the trajectory shows is that most of that is likely to come forward during the early and then middle parts of the plan, with then tailing off towards the end. That doesn't matter for the purposes of delivery through the course of the plan, because obviously what you're required to have regard to under the soundness test of the framework, for paragraph 35, is planning to meet your objective PSS needs, and that is obviously through the plan period, and that is what our plan does. So I think by way of an introduction, that's hopefully covers all of the main points as to what the council's latest position is.
Thank you. Can we, if you just look at the tables in your tables, table on page 4.
Yeah.
And the table on page 6. And the box B. On the table on page 4, it refers to adjustment for oversupply since the plan's base date. We'll come on to this, but spread over the remaining 15 years of the plan period, April 2024 to March 2035. Should that be March 2039?
Yes.
And on the page, on the table on page 6, it says April 2022 to March 2035. Should that be April 2025 to March 2039?
Let me just do the math, sorry, Mark. Yes, because that's what the 15 years would then fall to, and then 14 years would then fall to. So the number of years is right, but the date is relevant.
Yeah. And the figures are correct, I think. I've added the figures up, they seem to be the right figures. It's just the reference.
Yeah, it's the reference to the March 2035 date is the incorrect one.
And on the second one, it's April 2025 because it's
Yes.
2025. So if we just look at the base dates then, and if we come on to that, what you're saying is that in terms of the expected adoption date, you are, because you've now just adopted a new LDS, your expected adoption date, and that was
We've put between April and June, dependent. There's like a caveat in there depending on time frames. But the dates are between April and June.
So you're suggesting that if given that adoption date and given what it says in PPG, you're suggesting that in 1st of April 2025 date should be the one that would be more appropriate than the 1st of April 2024?
Well, I think as we've outlined, sir, because of where we are as we sit here today, we're sort of in the middle of the two, so it just depends how quickly the process moves, and hence why we've calculated it by reference to both 5-year periods, so that you've got the information that satisfies you either way. So our case is, however you do it, we have a 5-year housing land supply, and if it ends up being June next year that we're adopting the local plan, then I think we'd accept in that situation that the 25 base date would be the more appropriate one to use because we're then into that next monitoring year. But if things end up happening quicker than that, then we're content that the 24 base date would be the appropriate one.
So the figures that would be used for, if you went for 1st of April 20, or we went for 2025, the 24-25 completions would be estimates, because we're not dealing with new data, we're still dealing with 1st of April 2024 data, but we're then estimating the completions for the 24-25 period?
Yes,
Which
because
is set out now.
yes, because we obviously can't know what they're going to be, so that's the best we can do. And which is obviously what you would always do in that situation, because you can't.
Yeah.
You have to make a reasonable estimate, which is what we've done in our evidence.
So one of the points made by one of the respondents was about confidence.
Yeah.
Because of 23, 24, and earlier, obviously, as far as I'm aware, the completion's not disputed, they're no. So, but 24, 25, one point was made that, well, that's an estimate. What confidence have we got that those estimates will actually relate to actual completions? And I think it might be Tanya when getting made in. So do you want to come in, Mr. Ostenfeld, and then I'll let Mr. Humphries respond to that point?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think hearing from Mr. Humphries, I think we're broadly in agreement, I think, on the way in which you can utilise a base date on the basis of where we are in the content process. So I think as he's outlined, we're halfway through the year. So we don't have a record of all the completions today, so we won't have that information for a number of months. But we also don't have the complete picture about the deliverability or the sites that form part of the supply for the next monitoring year. So I think hearing from Mr. Humphries, I take the point that if we are to be, if the plans were to be adopted prior to the 1st of April, then we could continue to utilise the 2024 period, but until then we are simply speculating on what might be. And I think it would be appropriate to include that error of margin and assume the 2025 base days. It very much depends on the programme of the examination, but I think it's more pragmatic for us to align with the 2024 start date.
You say error of margin. Why do you suggest? Do you think it's a error of margin that we should worry about? Is this something specific in the way in which the council may be estimating its completions?
I don't actually cast any doubt over the way the completions are recorded. I think, as we're going to come on to, because we're looking at whether an oversupply is important, these sort of factors sort of weigh into what the council's forward requirement should be. So I think it's more of a factor of just making sure we are relying upon the robust data that we have available to us. If it is the case that the base date rolls over, I know that the government would be publishing records of completions for the 23-24 year in November this year, so we would have access to that. If the period does roll over, we'd be able to sort of more accurately reflect on what has happened in the last year. But also sort of take it to a point where we are confident that our assessment of the livability of the sites is informed by that record of where each of the sites are. I think, as we can perhaps come on to, if for example, so there's a question of deliverability, our assessment is made at this particular moment in time, whereas the council has a different understanding of deliverability. We're looking at a base date in April next year.
Is there anybody else who wishes to come on the point that this was raised before I ask the council to? Does anybody have anything they wish to say on 1st April 24 or 1st April 25?
Thank you, sir. It's a simple point, I suppose, in that we just need to be clear on what sites the council is contending meet the definition of deliverable or not, which goes back to the hearing sessions from 2 weeks ago, which I appreciate you familiar with, sir. It was just that point as to which sites are deliverable and which ones aren't, for the purposes of finding and support.
Yeah, so just in terms of then the point about do we need to make some sort of allowance for a margin of error, because what we're relying on for 2024-25 are estimates. What we would say is those are the years, or that's the year you have the most confidence in, because that's the most you know, that's where we have the most contemporaneous evidence as to what is happening now. So if you were to do the trawl through CD31 and look at the sites which are contributing or predicted to contribute to that first year of supply, you have evidence as to what is happening now in relation to those sites. So a lot of them, for example, are already on site, and the sites that are under construction. They've developed, and in fact we touched on some of this last time we were here, some of those sites are already delivering homes now, and so we know that those are actually the sites where we have the highest degree of confidence because of the evidence being so contemporary and up to date in relation to them. So we wouldn't consider that there is any need to make any sort of reduction for the current year. You would just treat it in the same way you would any other year on the basis of the evidence, but actually would have the strongest degree in confidence of that. And if you were to look at table 11C, which, CD31, and the sort of summary table, which is on PDF 16 or real page 15, you can see that the completions data for the last 3 years shows an upward trend. So we know that the housing situation is moving in the right direction. We're actually predicting for 24-25 slightly less homes than were delivered last year, so we're comfortable with the robustness of the information and the estimates that we've made. And just going back to then the point about the definition of deliverable and the discussion we had on the last occasion, as I was at pains to make out then an idea again now, you know, the site being deliverable, there is a specific definition that applies to 5 years, which obviously the 5 years you're looking at will depend on the base date. But I was keen to make the point that we're confident that the evidence we have provided in relation to the sites that are included in the 5th year, whatever you take that as, being 24-25, would meet that definition, because the evidence is such that it shows you have a high degree of confidence that the delivery we're predicting from those sites is sufficient to show that is a likely level of delivery.
Okay. Do you wish to come back on that?
Yes, please, sir. Only insofar as, well, if the sites were considered deliverable, they would surely be in the deliverable supply right now as at a base date of 2024. The fact that they've been pushed beyond the 5-year period at a base date of 2024 must mean that the council does not consider those sites to be deliverable.
I just on the point, I think, let me put it in my words, so that if you take, for example, the summary table, we touched on this, didn't we, before? So in the green box, if something is in what would be year 6, in a white box, your argument, I think, is that you can't just automatically assume that becomes in the green box then, if we shift the 5 years on. Because the test would have to be, is that deliverable in terms of the FPPF?
Yes, I would have thought that the council had gone through an exercise to conclude whether the site should be included within the 5-year supply or not within the first 5-year period. Clearly some of those sites are moved to year 6. So they or not.
So you can't just drop into year 5 if you
Right,
it off.
that's my point, so yes.
I understand.
Quite a simple response to that, sir. As again, I was at pains to stress in the last occasion. Deliverable has a very specific definition. That means it's going to be delivered within the next 5 years. So if we're looking now, we'll be treating that as a April 1st, 24 base date. If you take some of our strategic sites, so let me just find a good example. So yeah, above that summary table, so PDF 16 of CD 31. We have, so say you take SHAR 1, we've included a figure of 100 dwellings per year going forward for a long period of time.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean that we think that there's not going to be development. You know, we've not banged all of those houses in the first 5 years because we think this housing site is deliverable. We think there's a certain amount of housing that is going to come forward per annum on that site. And what we thought to do is use the evidence that is available to say what is going to be delivered in each year. And so different sites deliver at different rates over different period of time. So we're not saying it's not deliverable, we're saying certain proportions aren't deliverable within 5 years, but we have the evidence to show what is likely to be delivered over a longer period of time. And that's what we thought to do.
Yeah. I understand that in relation to Top Farm, but if we take an example of a site where it starts in effectively a year on this table 2930, and I mean, I've just looked at non-strategic sites, so pick up land at Bermuda Road, which we did discuss last time, we've noted down the situation,
Yeah.
so I'm not going to revisit it, but I'm just using an example, is that that is not not a 5-year supply site, but if we move the start date to, let's say, 25, on that trajectory, it would sit within, it would then become a 5-year supply site, by reason of just moving it along.
Yeah.
But the circumstances on the site, but the question is, do the circumstances on that particular site, as an example, meet the definition of deliverable in the framework? Because Mr. Favala's point is that if they did, it would be in the green. But your point is that on the information that you have, that site would start in 2930, whether it's in the green box or the white box. Is that correct?
Yes, and actually that's a really useful one to look at, because we then look at the road below. We have up at Abbey Street, which we don't have in the year 2930. We have in the year after that, because what we've done is said, what does the evidence actually show us in relation to when the sites are going to deliver? So it's not a case of we go, it's not deliverable within the definition, so we just move it to year 6. We look at what does the evidence show, objectively assessed, as to when that site is going to deliver housing, and then we put the supply from that site in the appropriate year.
Okay.
And so if the time frame were to shift as to what 5-year supply, as to when we're looking at things, we would then say in that scenario, yes, it does meet the definition of deliverable on the basis of the evidence. But you can't just look at things, is this deliverable within the NPPF definition, yes or no, and then bang everything in year 6. What you have to actually do is look at the evidence as to when a particular site is going to deliver and what it's going to deliver in a particular year, and that's what we're doing in this document.
So a number of the strategic sites also are due to start delivering in what is currently year 6 in that table and the summary table.
Yes, and we went through...
SHAR 3, SHAR 5, that's their first year of delivery,
Yes.
and SHAR 7.
And if you recall, when we discussed this on the last occasion, actually a number of those sites were suggesting that they were going to start delivering earlier than that, but we wanted to be cautious in the approach we've taken and ensuring, as much robustness as possible in our supply. So we've made modifications to predictions accordingly, because we want to have confidence in the figures in there that there is going to be delivery.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sorry.
So, Mr. Park, do you wish to say?
No, thank you, sir. You've taken the point. Thank you.
Whilst we're looking at sites, I suppose it's an opportunity to look at the strategic and non-strategic allocations that those who've not raised any particular site-specific points because they weren't here for the session have raised them in their papers for this session. I'm looking at you, Mr. But it may apply to someone else. Do you wish to highlight anything in particular of any particular site in relation to its delivery within the 5 year? supply.
From my perspective, sir, I'm quite content that my submission for we were ready represents our proposed amendments. So I don't want to sort of ground particularly what comes with it.
Okay. Mr. Williams, while you were here, weren't you last time, so?
Yeah, yes, sir, so I wasn't planning to go over the strategic and non-strategic.
Yeah, we've noted.
Yeah.
We noted exactly we noted what you said last time.
What I did want to raise through this session was that I've queried the deliverability of 3 sites with full planning permission,
Yes, yeah.
which are in my hearing statement, so to
Yeah. So I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anything in relation to the trajectory on the table for strategic and non-strategic. That's the notion that starts to the side we've got submissions. So, do you wish to highlight anything on the sites with planning permission, Mr. Flower?
Yes, so I had in my hearing statements questioned the deliverability of 3 sites in the trajectory, 3 sites with full planning permission. Site 812 Chapel Street, site 1087 Queens Road, and site HSG1 Newton Fields Farm.
Okay.
But to save time, sir, that's all set out in my hearing statement as to why I think those 3 sites should be removed from the deliverable supply.
Okay. Does council wish to respond to, you've seen the hearing statement from Mr. Flower?
Yes, please. In relation to the Chapel Street side, which is got 9 units within the supply, there is actually an application in currently. So there's a bit of history to this site, and there was 9 dwellings which was previously approved as a permission which is being built out, and then an application has come in, and that's currently pending with an amendment on it to just change the window sizes with regards to the flats. I spoke to the case officer last week on this site, and it's progressing. There's also a section 73 application in to amend the access of the site so that it can be, it was an issue over the land with regards to those 9 units. There's been highway comments received on that, and that's also moving forward. There's no significant objection from highways on that. So there's essentially an amended application in currently, which is pending. The case officer is confident that there's no issues which are significant that can't be resolved on that, and it should be determined within the next couple of months. And therefore, even if there was a delay, it didn't come forward in the year 1 essentially of that supply for the 9 units, we still are confident that it would be delivered within the 5-year period in relation to that one.
But not in 24, 25?
Well, I think we still consider it would be delivered, but if you were uncertain, given that the application is still pending and hasn't been determined as of today, then even if that was to slip by a year, that would we still consider that would be delivered. With regards to the Queen's Road site, for the 14 units which have got full permission, the site was passed as implemented in 2011. However, towards the back end of last year, it's been remarketed. Well, actually, sorry, early this year, it's been remarketed for sale with planning permission, and we spoke to the agents that are marketing that, and they have had interest in that at the moment. So that's just going through that process with regards to the site being sold, obviously with the planning permission for 14 units. So again, whilst we've got the delivery in year 1, we acknowledge, sat here today, that there might be a slippage on that by a year, potentially, but that would still be deliverable within the 5-year on that side. And then with
So which one is this? Queen's Road?
Queen's Road, yeah.
Is it 1087?
1087 Queen's Road for 14 units.
So you've got that in year, starting in year 2930?
Yes,
That would be in
Draft
the...
statement, just make it
Yeah,
clear.
it's-
Oh yeah, sorry, it's because I've got the spreadsheet up and yeah, sorry, so we had,
So it's not in the 5-year supply
so
now?
it's, no, but it's, we've got it coming forward in year 6
Yeah.
on that, and again, that gives us that leeway, given that it's currently being marketed and up for sale. on that
I
side.
suppose that's Mr. Favag's point, is that on that basis, it would
Yeah.
probably sit outside the definition in the framework of
Clear.
5-year supply site.
Yeah, we, for our purposes, it's got full planning permission. It has been in the past, it's implemented, and it is currently up for sale and being marketed with planning permission. And having spoken to the agents, they have got interest in that site for developers that want to bring it forward quickly. So we consider that it is going forward.
And that would meet the definition of deliverable in the brain.
Full planning permission, with an expectation
And it's full planning permission that has been implemented.
started.
Yes.
As in, yes, so it's not, it can't expire because it's been implemented.
And then the final site was the Nuneaton Fields Farm site. This is again a Persimmon site which is adjacent to a site which Persimmon are already on site for. There's a full application pending for 34 units. There's a pro forma in the evidence which has been provided by Persimmon where they anticipate the units coming forward 27. As I said, they're already on the adjacent site and it's a case of they're already in place then to once they've got future to move over and complete that. So we consider that our site is to be public.
So the full application is pending.
Yeah. Again, I was going to say, having spoke to the case officer on that, last week, still confident there's no significant issues that can't be resolved on the site.
The location of that site is in between the existing Persimmon site and another strategic allocation, which is Taylor and Brewing, is building out at the moment. And the actual site is required to come forward because it's providing the link road, it's a northern relief road, between all of those sites. So the link road is actually in, so it's just really an extension of SLR on the existing Persimmon site.
Was it a 5-year supply site in the inquiry information?
Yeah, sorry, it was in our 5-year supply, it wasn't disputed.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Favag, do you want to come back to any of those?
I think right now, specifically on HSG 1, what we were just talking about, clearly it doesn't have planning permission yet, so it's got no planning status. So it's in terms of, it's the clear evidence test, in terms of the deliverability definition, and yeah, which I'm happy to use, so to take a view.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Are there any other points in relation to sites with planning permission in relation to 5 years plan? Thank you. One of the, just picking up some of the points that were made at the outset from the relation to 5 years plan, is how the oversupply should be dealt with. And the council was suggesting that the oversupply be set out, be I suppose, apportioned across the whole plan period, taking account of the proportion across the whole plan period. short-term, so not necessarily reverse living from that. Do you just want to explain the rationale for it, please?
Yeah, so before I do, I'll have to just do this. So we set out in our MIQ response exactly what you just alluded to there, which I think and why you say it's appropriate to do. And that shows us with a very robust supply housing. But just to give you comfort, even if you don't take into account oversupply, we would still have a sufficient housing land supply on either the 24 or the 25 base date. So if I could just take you to our MIQ statement, and if we just start with the table on page 4, so that's the 2024 base date calculation. Our requirement is 2725, using the 545 figure from the plan. If you were to ignore steps B and C and D, which is where the oversupply is taken into account, you would then move to step E, which is the insertion of a 5% buffer. A 5% buffer on a figure of 2725 would give you 136 dwellings, which would then make your requirement over the 5-year period 2,861. So 2725 plus 136, 2861. Your annual requirement would then be 572, which is simply 2861 over 5. As you can see then at table, the table we're just looking at, row H, our supply for that 5-year period is 3,750. 3,750 divided by the 572 would give you a 6.56 year supply of housing, which in raw numbers is a surplus of 889. If you were to do the same process using the 1st of April 25 base date, those first few steps are all the same. So again, it's the 2725, 136, 2861, then give you 572 per year. Our supply is almost the same for the next period, just by chance. It's 3756, so 6 houses more. And so the maths is then almost the same. That would result in a 6.57 years supply of housing, which is a surplus of 895 dwellings. So on either case, even if you didn't take into the oversupply, for the purposes of calculating 5-year housing land supply, we still have a robust housing land supply, because it's 6.5 something years in either situation. In terms of oversupply, what the framework requires at paragraph 35 in relation to plan period is that we plan to meet our objectively assessed needs. Our objectively assessed needs have been calculated across the plan period, and as we've already looked at, we then have a specific figure on an annual basis, but that obviously accumulates to give you the total requirement for the plan period. And that summary table we've looked at before, as I've already said, shows that we have an 11.7% surplus over the totality of the plan period if you take into account completions, commitments, allocations and windfall. So we are planning to meet and exceed our objectively assessed need. And that's not dependent on any way in how you feature or factor in oversupply. That is the plan across the plan period. So this is a plan that is not in some way trying to avoid meeting its need. It is planning to meet and exceed its need. We don't need to go back into obviously the topic we discussed on the very first round of these sessions. So the relevance of oversupply is then only in relation to how do you calculate 5-year housing land supply as you go on. Various references have been made by those making representations in terms of what policy, national policy says in this regard, and I think its acceptance at September 2023 version of the framework is silent in this regard. There's case law which considers the September 2023 version of the framework in this regard, which again has been referred to by Objective, which is a case of Tewkesbury Borough Council and Secretary of State. The citation of which is 2022 PTSR 340, and we can provide you with a copy of that, inspected if you like. But what that says is that in the absence of policy within the framework, the question on whether or not you take into account oversupply of housing prior to the 5-year period you're assessing and the calculation of 5-year housing land supply will be a matter of planning judgment for the decision maker, bearing in mind the particular circumstances of the case being considered. In the situation we're dealing with here, we have a planned period which starts 2021. We know what the completions are for that year, 2022 and 2023. And so when looking at whether or not we have got a housing land supply, we say it's appropriate to have regard to those, because otherwise you're not actually assessing your delivery against your total need across the planned period looking forward. And we've simply annualised that rather than sort of condensing out and spread that across, because we want to maintain positive supply of housing and seek to pursue the goal of significantly boosting the supply of housing, including the oversupply doesn't in any way curtail that. We're still trying to meet and exceed our minimum needs. Obviously, as discussed, the 545 is actually an uplifted figure anyway. And so in all the circumstances, as we detail even more in our statement, we think it's appropriate in the circumstances we find here to take into account oversupply. But as I say, it's only relevant to the calculation of 5-year housing land supply. It's not relevant to the consideration of the totality of the plan period. And in any event, even if you don't take these into account, we still have a robust supply over the next 5 years, or the 5 years after that.
Thank you. Mr. Crowe.
Thank you, sir. I think in the first instance, just to pick on the point that Mr. Humphreys raised at the start, that clearly this is, we're talking about oversupply in terms of the 5-year land supply calculation, which I completely understand. In terms of the two scenarios of the calculation setting out, okay, well, if oversupply is taken out, and ignore it, this is the position. Well, what you've heard from the previous hearing statements is the objections to the housing requirement, where evidence submitted from myself and others contends that housing requirement should be increased, but you've already heard that, so I'm not going to go into that again. And likewise, evidence that I've submitted as well, challenging the deliverability of the supply. So there's clearly multiple elements to the calculation. There's the requirement, there's the oversupply, and there's the actual deliverable supply. Well, I'm challenging all three of those elements of the calculation. In terms of oversupply, completely understand, completely get that it's a matter of planning judgment. It's just that as a matter of planning judgment, I contend that given the significance of Nuneaton's housing prices and shortfall, levels of homelessness, affordability and everything else that I've evidenced in my previous hearing statements, that as a matter of planning judgment and reflecting national priority to boost the supply of homes and the written ministerial statement of July 2024, that surely as a matter of planning judgment we shouldn't be factoring in oversupply in those circumstances. The second point is that even if, as a matter of planning judgment, you decide that oversupply can be included as part of the 5-year land supply calculation, then there certainly needs to at least be an adjustment to the oversupply that is claimed, given that some of that oversupply relates to meeting Coventry's needs. In that the 2019 adopted plan is not just delivering from Nuneaton and Bedford, but is also seeking to deliver unmet needs from the wider housing market area, including Coventry, circa 4,000 homes. So to claim credit for that as part of the oversupply, in my mind, can't be justified. There's a 2019 plan that's seeking to meet Coventry's needs, and the current plan, which isn't seeking to meet Coventry's needs. Does that make sense, sir?
It does. My question back to you would be, we're not discussing today the figure, the requirement figure. And if the requirement figure is the requirement for the local plan, what difference does it make? That argument, or some of it would have been Coventry's needs, because that figure is a requirement on a particular base date, so 2021.
Yes, but as part of the claimed oversupply, part of that oversupply that the council is claiming is not just to meet the needs of Nuneaton and Bedford. Part of those completions that have been delivered over the plan period today, over the new plan period, been to meet Coventry's needs. So the council's now seeking to use that to offset the requirements, or to offset the requirement side, in effect, the 5-year land supply calculation for the new plan, which is just going to meet Nuneaton and Bedford.
Isn't that a need argument?
Pardon?
Isn't that a need argument? That the figure then, in your case, which you said before, should be higher? Not a supply.
No, I'm focusing that purely on oversupply, in terms of how the oversupply number is calculated for the purposes of the 5-year land supply calculation.
So, Mr. Constable,
I'd like to just make a point on that, if I may.
you can't, I'm afraid you've not made any representations on this matter.
No, but this guy has just talked about stuff that is wrong.
Well, that's for the council to argue that point, which I'm going to come on to. Thank you. Mr. Lucas.
Yeah, so just coming back to that, so obviously recognition there that it's ultimately a matter of planning judgment what compelled to do one particular thing or another. But the first point that was made was, well, having regard to the extent of need and housing crisis in London, it'd be inappropriate to take into account oversupply. The completions figures for the 3 years that we include, which are 2021, 22, 2023, are 796, 956, 1009. So against the 545 requirement, those are very significant completions, and so the 1009 is almost double the requirement. And so if you don't have some recognition of that level of delivery, it's really going to skew the picture in Nuneaton and not properly recognise what is actually happening in relation to delivery. It's not a case where we're sort of exceeding the target, a couple of houses or 10 houses. It's very substantial, and so to not consider that, and not consider the oversupply, will present a distorted picture of the actual housing requirements and rates of delivery in Nuneaton. But in relation to the need point and how that should be factored in this context, I have to confess I don't fully follow the argument that's being made, but we need to bear in mind that what we've assessed things against is the 545 figure of the plan, which, as we discussed the first time we were here, is not Nuneaton's objectively assessed need. The Neaton project to be assessed is 409. So the 545 is an uplifted figure. So nothing is being ignored with regards to need. But I also don't really understand why it's necessarily relevant in this context if the need figure that is adopted is an acceptable one. I don't see why that would change the relevance of whether or not you include an item for oversupply as a calculation of 5-year housing undersupply.
Just on those supply figures that you just gave us, how do they compare to the requirement figure in the adopted plan?
Do you mean those completions
Those
figures?
completions, yeah.
Yeah.
The requirement is 8.2 currently, although
And was that kind of a...
that was a step trajectory.
Okay, so
So it went
just
up.
for those years it would have been 8.1.
Yeah, for those years it would have been 8.2.
I mean, I understand the point. I understand Mr. Price's point, I understand the council's point is for us to determine where we go. Do you want to come back?
Yeah, just to make it even simpler, having had those numbers set out, okay, so 796, 956 and 1009, well, the council is comparing that against the requirement for 545 dwellings per annum through the new plan and claiming the oversupply against that 545. What I'm saying is it should at least be adjusted to account for the fact that the requirement for those 3 years was 812 dwellings per annum.
So for 2 of those years it was above that figure, for 1 year it was below it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're comparing different things.
So there's an overlap, isn't there, between
Exactly.
the adopted plan and
Exactly.
the
And that is why,
this plan.
if as a matter of planning judgment you accept that oversupply can be included in the population, it should at least be adjusted to reflect that the requirement over that period was 812, not 545. But I'm happy to leave it there now. Thank you.
Mr Conqueror, as I said, you're not allowed to participate.
I did comment on need, so
It's for the council to come back on the point.
the need is being misrepresented because there was an under-delivery from 2011. So the reason we're at 800 target goes right back to 2011. And if you don't look over the whole of the last plan period, you're making a misassumption that we really had a need for 800, which was the peak of a previous 20-year plan.
Yeah, because Mr. Condola, I know you won't want to join in, but you are not seeking changes to the plan in relation to this matter, and therefore you are a supporter of the plan, and therefore you're effectively with the council. So it's for the council to argue your points before us.
So I'll ask Mr. Teal just to address how the adopted plan treated housing during the period we're talking about. But just as a reminder of what we need to consider here, NPPF requires local plans to be based on most up-to-date evidence. The most up-to-date evidence in relation to Nuneaton's need is the 409 figure, which would apply through those 3 years we just looked at, 21, 22, 23. And so if you're basing it on the most up-to-date evidence, that would be the relevant comparison. We've compared it then against an uplifted figure, which is what we're proposing to adopt in the plan, to take account of, all the points discussed on the last occasion beyond just simply our local needs. So we think it is a perfectly valid comparison that is based on the most relevant up-to-date information. But even if it's not, and you were to use the local plan figure, there'll still be a surplus from those years, which you would then, again, be justified in factoring in. But I'll just ask Sarah to come in on the point about how the local plan treated those years before.
Yeah, just for context, the adopted plan period commenced in 2011, and I think Nuneaton's need alone at that point, it was established here, I think it was 503, not 502. And then there was the step trajectory was implemented on the point of adoption of the 2019, which went up to, or 2018. So then the requirement was 812, and that was to contribute towards Coventry's unmet need. But that has since, as it's set out in the sub-regional head now, and obviously you've heard the points, that need has been recognised by ONS itself that it was calculated inaccurately, which is why we have then gone for the sub-regional head name approach, because because of Coventry student population, I think. But obviously there's a lot of, in the sub-regional head note, it details the reasons for that. But it's significant inaccuracies with Coventry's stats at that point. But yeah, I think for the purpose of, as Freddie outlined, this our requirement is 409, but we've gone for 545, which allows that increment.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Austin-Fell.
Thank you, Chair. On this point, the council has sought to take you to paragraph 35 of the APPM, which means to justify when an approach is positively prepared and why oversupply will be factored into consideration. But the very simple point is there's nothing in paragraph 35 that talks about oversupply. Indeed, there's nothing actually in the NPPF itself which mentions oversupply, and the only references to it are tucked away in the PPG. Those references have been a little bit opaque, which, as Mr. Humphreys has alluded to, has led to the Tewkesbury case in the High Court, which has sought to define where oversupply can be a consideration. Because the reference in the PPG itself talks about using oversupply to address past shortfalls in delivery. So it's whether a certain point is you should use those oversupply years to effectively fill in the holes in all past performance, or whether in fact you can account for oversupply in totality. And I would agree with Mr. Humphreys that oversupply is a matter of private judgment. It's not something that should be accounted for simply because it has happened. You have to take a determination about whether or not it's going to be appropriate for a particular given authority. So that's why we look at it on an individual basis. We just heard from the council that from 2011 the council hasn't been able to meet its plan targets up to the sort of monitoring period 23-24. For your reference, Inspector, I set out at paragraph 1.1.24 of my proof. And we can see there that whilst the council employed a lower state trajectory in the first years of the plan, the 502, it then increases to 812. And if we were to, for the purposes of hypothetical, we could sort of look at just the progress and success of the last plan. To date, there would be a cumulative shortfall of 1,460 dwellings. And the shortfall is something that has been a factor in recent appeal decisions. I think you'll have 3 decisions probably in front of you, the most recent of which I think has been recently added into the court document library as the long sheet, which is court document 36. All 3 of those decisions have factored the shortfall into the calculation of housing land supply. Why have they done that? Because it's right to do so, and that's what the guidance tells us. But when we come to a planning judgment, I think we have to look at how the council has performed in the past to give us some steer as to how or whether an oversupply should be presented in the future. And in very plain terms, the council can now demonstrate an oversupply because the dial has changed, because the housing requirement has shifted. Up until very recently, the council has been consecutively not being able to demonstrate housing land supply, which has led to a shortfall. And I don't think it's right to then flip a switch and then turn that to a council's position where they're effectively diminishing the housing requirement for the next 5 years of the plan. So as I see it, there's current justification to make a planning judgment whereby we take a view that past performance doesn't dictate that the council could account for oversupply in the future. One interesting point, and this aspect isn't going to improve me today, but it's a point taken from the Bristol Ministerial Statement, which is a material consideration. The Deputy Prime Minister's comments on this. She said, and I hope you don't mind quoting verbatim, that given the chronic need for housing we see in all areas, we should celebrate strong delivery records without diluting future ambitions. But whilst there's been ambiguity over how oversupply is treated in land supply calculations, it's quite clear the direction of travel from government is to make it very unambiguous, and that future oversupply shouldn't be factored into calculations, and that is part of their manifesto, part of their drive to deliver growth in the next 5 years.
Thank you. Mr. O'Brien.
Yeah, I just wanted to build on that point a little bit further. Some fellas made in reference to that being like past delivery and the shortfall that's been accrued to now the 1400 figure. I made the point at 1.4 of my hearing statement where I actually move forward through to the end of the current adopted plan period to 2031. At the same time as CD31 was produced, which looks at the 5-year supply for the emerging plan period. The housing trajectory was updated for the adopted borough plan, and that provides an estimation of delivery up to 2031, and it concludes that on top of the completions that have been provided to date, including the 700 and the 900 and the 1009 figure that were mentioned before, there will be a further 5,723 dwellings delivered now up to 2031. Council's best case, and that would result in an overall supply by end of March 2031 of 12,703. That's a shortfall of 1,357 on the 14,060 adopted requirement. So again, that's council's best case, all the best completion figures we've just heard, and that there'll still be 1,300 short, and that is 100 if you were to work that out as the adopted requirement. I think it was 702 we talked about. That's 193%, so that's nearly 2 years with the plan period supply, adopted plan period supply, that they'll fall short on this by. Again, all council's best figures. So again, in that context, is it right that this oversupply, by changing the dial, that undersupply becomes an oversupply?
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a simple response to what we just heard there. As everybody is recognised, where this is relevant is the context in which you are considering it. The context in which you are considering this question is the proposal for the adoption of a new local plan, which has a specific plan period. That local plan has therefore calculated what its need is. So comparing, the housing land supply position against the existing plan, which this plan is proposing to replace, it literally makes no sense. Why would you? We're not going to carry on in the development management control situation, judging planning applications against the old plan. We're going to judge it against this new plan. And so the thing to do is judge this issue in that context. What we have shown is within that plan period, which because we're now into it, what the oversupply would have been if we were measuring it against the figure that we're putting forward as the proposed requirement in the plan, and calculated it that way. And that's the only logical way to do it, because the context we're examining this is this plan. So there isn't a past oversupply that needs to be factored in separately, because we're calculating things afresh and judging it against that. There's nothing that's been missed out. It's providing you with a up-to-date calculation of need against which to judge things going forward. And then, so when you're assessing oversupply in this context, you're looking at its utility, predicting what's going to happen in the first 5 years of the plan, and whether or not the council, on the point of adoption, is going to have a 5-year housing land supply. And given the recent rates of delivery that we've seen, which we've already looked, we say it's entirely appropriate to therefore factor in oversupply. And if I could just give you a few references for your notes, our full approach to this is detailed in CD 31, which is the latest housing land supply background paper, which you've already alluded to, and paragraphs 3.3 to 3.7 on page, half of page 5, PDF page 6 of that document, where we deal with that, and with reference to the Tewkesbury case there. If you're inclined to look at the Tewkesbury case, the same as reading the whole thing, that the key paragraphs are paragraphs 43 to 49, where the judge deals with oversupply, and it's absolutely clear from that case that it is ultimately a matter of money judgment.
Thank you. Or we can get our document, obviously, put in examination.
We're happy to put it in. Like I said, I don't think actually there's been any disagreement across the table as to what it means in that law. It says it's a matter of high judgment. We'll have that time to do this.
Thank you. Thank you. We've asked a question about buffer. We've just dealt with oversupply. I've got no further questions on oversupply. I understand the points maybe. But in terms of buffer and allowances, are there any points that respondents wish to make on buffer and allowances?
It's a relatively minor point. It's in relation to EB9, the windfall small size study, and in the inclusion of allowance for 42 values per annum for windfall size. It's noted that the council have tried to be robust, and it's clear what it says in the NPPF about ensuring that it takes account of expected future trends and justifying the windfall allowance. And so I just wanted to draw attention to sort of table 6 of EB9, which sets out the completions on small sites, and that goes back to 2011 and totals 569 over that period. And I just wanted to particularly draw attention to the year 2021, where that figure is 117, which is significantly greater than any of the other figures. It's almost double the second highest.
So, Mr. Brown, let me just get up. I've got it down here.
I wasn't sure.
Table 6. Table 6 you're looking at,
Yeah, it's page 11 of the figure.
yeah, got it now, thank you.
Yeah, so it's the far right column there. You can see there that 2020, 21, 117. The next highest year that I can see is 2016-17 at 64, so almost double, and then the average is 51. And so I made the case in my statement that that the robustness of reducing the figure from 51 to 42, where the council suggests removing 9 dwellings, I think that's addressed at paragraph 6.5 in their conclusion, and then there is reasoning as to why they've selected the 9 dwellings, but in the conclusion it sort of explains that they take the 9 off and take forward the 42 figure. The reasoning behind the 9 figure is to do with the fact that some of those small sites would have been allocations if they had a plan adopted at that time. I'm of the view that that doesn't take account of the fact that it was in 2018 through 2019 where the council were unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply, and that the presumption in favour was in play, and that tallies almost perfectly with the year 2020-21, whereby you've got this anomalous figure which is nearly double. And I'm of the view that, again, often in statistics, when you take an average, you remove the top one and the bottom one, and then you use the sort of the 9 figures in between. And I suggest that approach should be taken here, and there should be another reduction in the small sites allowance down to a reduction of 5. I make the case for, but it could be 5 or 6 depending on how you round to take it to 37.
Yeah, I'll actually ask Sir Anthony Whittaker, who was his first day of the inquiry for the examination, but his presence as well nonetheless, and just ask him to address the audience involved in assisting the council in the housing land supply position, and can advise you on the approach taken to the report.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, so in terms of the windfall estimate, it's clearly set out in the EB9 the work that the council's done to to look at all of this. It's broken down the sites as to whether or not they're prime notifications, if they're large sites, small sites, strategic sites, and the lot. In terms of the trends picking up towards the end of that time frame, I mean, that's a natural a natural result of the adoption of the plan, and more certainty being provided to applicants of where and when development would be suitable and would be supported by policy. So there's naturally going to be a slight increase with the update of the local plan. We did a little bit of looking at some of the monitoring data to see whether or not it was likely that in the absence of a final policies becoming out of date would have tweaked the figures, and we don't believe that that's the case at all when we looked at the data. Our monitoring database doesn't allow super detailed analysis, but if we took the rather cautious assumption that all of the greenfield sites outside of settlement boundaries were granted on appeal, it would only be 37 completions since 2011 that would have been sort of not in accordance with up-to-date policy. So we believe that the estimates in the study are robust, and we stand by those figures in the housing trajectory.
I suppose, well, so take that point, I suppose it's would the future trend continue? And I think it's better to look at it as an average removing anomalies, and therefore that is going to be much more of a reflection of whether or not that the small sites will continue in the future.
Okay, thank you. Is it on this point?
Thank you, sir. It's on offer, and hopefully it's uncontroversial. It should be in disagreement, I think, between parties, but it's just a recognition of the fact that during the course of the examination, we're likely could be pending to get an updated housing community test, and I think that being a principal guide on the application of the buffer would be useful to reflect upon our junction. From looking at data, I don't think it's actually going to change a great amount. I think it's just making sure that we can sort of ruminate on it when it lands.
We don't know.
Yes. December, I think, is historically the way to publish it in the past, but who knows what it's going to be.
Yes, I'm just saying on the point, I don't think there actually is any dissent that the buffer housing extent is the appropriate one. And then the only other point, I think Sarah had a point on the...
Yeah, just that in terms of the windfall for this year, it's projected that figure's 70, so we're taking a conservative approach with regards we believe. And as evidenced in the study, we think that the figure is appropriate.
And if the base date was moved forward to 25, 26, 42 would be moved, but would we not be a 42 in that year? So it would be moved forward? Okay.
The trajectory in CD 31, the summary table, the data is the data. The first 3 years is where we have known permissions on small sites, so we've applied the 10% non-delivery rate on the known
On the
permissions.
first 3 years?
On the first 3 years, and then windfall would kick in year 4, so
but if we moved it to 25,
yeah,
there would be 42 in there that would effectively, it would be 3 years from 25, wouldn't it?
it would be 3 years in the 25 base
Because
population,
you'll
it's
be
2 years in the
You'll be
24 base
counting
population.
completions in 24, in 24, 25 estimates.
But the issue is we obviously can't do that work now because we don't know the small sites situation. So but as if we were wanting to calculate as we sit here now, the 25 base state position, we have 3 years of 42.
It'd be 2 years worth of no.
2 years 42, wherever the 5 years.
No, you'd have 3 years of 42 because we don't know what the completions are, because they haven't happened yet. The general approach is 3 years based on a 0 because we have the actual information, and then 42, the remaining 2 years of prediction. But if we were to skip forward in time now and look at 5 years from 25, because we don't have the data from 24 and 24, 25, we can't do a 0 year, so you have 3 years of 42 and 2 years of 0.
Yeah, so the known planning permissions on small sites, that's factored in with a 24 base date trajectory, 3 years worth of figures in the 5 year supply, 2 years worth of windfall. If we rebase it, we shift it on 12 months, so it's a 2025 based calculation. It's based on the 2024 data, which is it's the latest we have. It would be 2 years worth of permissions and 3 years worth of windfall. The numbers stay the same, it's just it makes sense if you look at the trajectory in the table in the back. You move the green columns on, essentially, the green shading, the numbers would stay the same. That's how we'd approach it. And the non-delivery, 10% non-delivery on small sites, that's applied because it's applied to permissions, whereas windfall is based on completions.
That's because in your estimates for 24, 25, you've not estimated anything for windfall.
That's right, we haven't.
So you're putting that third one in, but normally it wouldn't be a 5 year street because you've not estimated anything for windfall for 24, 25 completions.
We're assuming in the housing trajectory, the 5 year housing and supply calculation, we're estimating no windfall. We're not accounting for any windfall in 24, 25, 25, 26 or 26, 27 because we have development management data permissions and we have the 10% non-delivery on small sites.
But there would be completions, but just you're not estimating them.
Exactly, that's what the non-delivery on
So
small
you
sites.
assume it's 42 because that's what it's assumed as a contribution to the full start plan period.
We've assumed a solid 42 dwellings per annum over the remainder of the plan period beyond the first 3 years because we have planning commission data for those first 3 years based on what we
So
know.
based on having 3 year permissions, whereas that's where the 3 years comes from.
Exactly.
So
Because you get 3 years to implement the
yeah,
commission,
okay.
so
Just
they're
trying to
phased out.
working out that bit right, okay,
Yeah.
so that's why it's 3 years.
Apologies.
Okay. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah, because it's common, isn't it, the government finance plan because if you've got permission,
We accept it would be double counting to also include the 42 in those first 3 years.
Yeah.
You've got the actual data,
Yeah.
you should use the actual data.
Yeah. Okay. I don't have any more questions now on finding our supply. And the big contributions on that. So it's timely now to have level that we break and we'll come back and look at Thank you. Welcome back. We're now moving on to part D, so question 39D, issue 2, which is about the period of the work plan period beyond the first 5 years. So the question is in regard to the document TD31, which is a key reference document. Does the plan make provision for supply specific deliverable for locations for growth for subsequent 6 to 10 years and where possible years 11 to 15 of the remaining plan period, and that is what the framework requires us to consider. We don't have many questions in relation to this particular part of the matter, and there were fewer points no correspondence in relation to this. The council has suggested, I think it's used the words if so minded, that we may wish to consider a step trajectory option for the overplan period because of the expected early delivery of sites. I I mean, we can start with that and ask the council if that is something that, I'm not sure whether you were just putting that for as something we may wish to consider, or whether that is formally something that we wish to put before as a suggested modification.
No, it's the former in essence. So we're content with with the figure that's been adopted, the requirement throughout the plan period in the plan, and we're content to proceed with that. And we were just in essence recognising that if you had concerns in that regard, we could propose an appropriate modification to address that. But our position as we sit here today is that the plan is sound in that regard. The one change that I alluded to earlier is that the trajectory, the latest trajectory, when you need to have a trajectory in your plan, is the one in CD 31, so there needs to be an update to include that trajectory in the plan, because the plan as submitted has an older trajectory in. But in terms of policy, we wouldn't be proposing any sort of main modification.
Yeah. And you are also, I think, proposing a more detailed trajectory, is that correct? Or did I pick that up?
I think it's, yeah, I think because we're content with the approach in the policy, we would propose to use the trajectory at Appendix A of CD 31, which is one PDF, page 9, or hard copy, page 8. But we're again sort of conditional, suggesting that if there was then a change to how you treated the requirement, we could then also provide a more detailed trajectory which sort of followed that. But as things stand, we would propose to include the trajectory of Appendix A of CD 31.
Do people wish to make any comments on the point that Mr. Humphries has made?
Just on the step trajectory, I just note at 39.27 of the matter statement, the council matter statement, it talks about if stepped housing requirement of 700 dwellings per annum was used, that would translate to a 5-year housing land supply figure of 5.63 years on adoption. It's just given the discussions we've had today with regards to how you treat oversupply and buffers and windfall, it would just be quite useful to sort of see how that has been reached. I realise that you talk about it not being something that you're pursuing, but it's out there, so I thought I'd just ask.
Can you help us with that?
Well, probably look to you. Don't push any mathematics in, but as has been recognised, we're not actually proposing to make that change. We stick with the 545.
So your position is because modifications only been made for soundness, you are not saying that the submitted plan approach is not sound?
No, because as we've already touched on this morning, we're content that the plan delivers its requirement over the plan period, and we've identified deliverable and developable and broad locations and appropriate allocations to deliver that requirement over the plan period. And so whilst there may be fluctuation in any given year, the target will be met by the end of the plan period.
Okay.
I mean, we'll come on to it this afternoon, but it will affect the review approach, won't it? And certainly in terms of the modification that the council is suggesting about delivery against the requirement. If you change the requirement to be a different figure each year.
That would have implications for
Yeah.
review. But that's why we are content with the approach as things stand in relation to the requirement.
Just on the numbers side of things, there's obviously a lot of moving parts with this and questions around how big the step should be. So it's something that we put in there. We'd be happy to recalculate it if we decide that it's required, but we don't believe it is required. I think in terms of further updates to the 5-year housing master plan, I think we'll be guided by yourselves as to what changes we need to make, and then we'll happily do those calculations.
Thank you. Mr. Park.
Thank you, sir. If a step trajectory was being proposed, then clearly we want to make representations to that and object to that as not being justified, but I don't think we necessarily need to go into that if the council is not proposing that.
Well, obviously, if it was something that we put forward as a recommended modification, then you would have ability to make representations at consultation station. So we know the point. It's not, we're not really expecting that be the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sorry, just a small comment on it. Just as a principle, I'm generally not really a fan of step trajectory, because someone can point to an imbalance or an initial failure of the planning process. It's a feature which is designed really to try and rectify issues. And I think generally I've observed, I've seen them put in place in the past where the council has relied on large allocations to go forward that perhaps haven't got any wind behind them yet. And you see that from the last plan where the step trajectory was there in place to allow some of these major allocations to go forward. Moving that time period, we can see in Appendix A of C31, that we're in that swell now, I think, and the allocations kind of either retaining planning portion or be level in the next 5 years. So the table of sort of Appendix A sort of doesn't suggest that a statutory trajectory is needed. It's normally the case where you've got allocations towards the back end of the plan. But I think if something is proposed, I think it's necessary to look at in more detail through modifications. So it does, just as an observation, it just sort of seems interesting that the council supply would naturally sort of fall off after sort of 2031, 32. I appreciate the looking at the totality of how it's delivering over the plan period. It does appear to me that there isn't any longer term sites that are going to factor into the plan. That may well be a feature of a review which we can discuss now.
Okay. So, having said all that, on this side of the table, on that side of the table, is there any other points that you wish to make for soundness in respect of the plan meeting the requirements as set out here on the framework for the years 6 to 10 and 11 to 15? Okay. We don't have any more questions. Just one question in relation to the housing trajectory, just to make it clear. So you are proposing that Appendix A of CD31 is fitted in to replace the current housing trajectory in the plan?
Yes, simply to reflect.
So the format is pretty much the same, isn't it?
I think the colouring and everything is pretty similar.
Pages are under there.
That one's a bit, but yeah, it's very similar.
Appendix B, what's her name, isn't it? Okay. Obviously subject to anything that we may recommend.
Well, yeah, sorry, just a bit slow getting to page 9, yeah. We replace that bar chart with the one that's CD31.
Okay. Are there any comments on that? From the detail of that housing trajectory that would sit there? Okay.
Sorry, just to be clear, when you say the one from CD31, it's all of the site data per site, or is it just the coloured bar chart?
Just the coloured bar chart, you have to, that what would illustrate the trajectory. So if you look at page 209 of the submitted version of the plan, there is a housing trajectory which is shown graphically, which is replace that graph.
With the one at CD 31 was referenced there.
Page 8, hard copy, or PDF page 9.
And it's quite different, and the reason why it's quite different is because we're dealing with an updated housing base, aren't we? Housing space base, which you've used in CD 31. So this reflects CD 31, whereas the one in on the plan 209 reflects the previous housing and supply evidence.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why it looks different to just moving things along. It is quite different, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah. So you've got another year of data basically, and then updated information evidence base as well, alongside slightly chatty.
And there's a dip in 26, 27, isn't there, where and then it picks up again in 27, 28.
Yes, and that just simply reflects the information that's in
Yeah.
the
Things-
tables in CD 31.
The first peak is current sites under construction with full plan district, then it dips back to 545 on this, and then go up again when those sites that are in train will start kicking in, and then it dips for the later part of the plan, which is where, as Mr. Osmond said, you'd be in the review test generally.
Yeah, well, we have our legal requirement to review after 5 years anyway, so that's always going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah, sorry, I misread the math statement. When it talks about including the housing trajectory that supports the 5-year housing land supply CD 31, I assumed it was, side by side, sort of like delivery figures, like through 10, 6 to 10. So I've just, I've laid down on that point, and sorry.
I read it that way originally, Mr. O'Brien, as well, because that's why I checked, because that's what I was seeking clarification as to whether all that data was going to be part of the plan.
So I've crossed out my hearing statement and that one was crossing it.
I picked it up.
That data will obviously be updated as we go on, and in monitoring reports completed, etc. And we have obligations and in relation to what data are required to maintain a condition on an annual basis. The bar chart, it's nice lime greens and oranges, it's the developing things to look at.
There is a question about housing trajectory this afternoon, isn't there? So I was wondering whether to make it there or not. But I mean, or as we're talking about it now, it's now better. Yeah. I mean, I think obviously we talked this morning and through the examination about the poor level of delivery of the adopted plan and how strategic sites have been slow to deliver. And then we've also sort of had, again, whether the way the sites have been monitored and the way the adopted DSA has been applied, hasn't been applied, a side-by-side sort of analysis of how sites have come forward or haven't come forward would have been crucial as part of that. And so, therefore, I make strong representations at 111 in my math statement that the side-by-side evidence should be provided, and a graphical representation just doesn't do that, and has caused problems with interpreting DSA through the adopted plan period. So that's why I was quite content to see that this side-by-side evidence was going to be inserted at the back. And these are often seen in plans. There's often 15-year plan period. Each site will what is anticipated, and we have that. So why not include it? And then it will help with monitoring DS7 as we can discuss something.
But it's still, we Mr. was in here, but it's still there as a document on which this chart has been constructed.
What
included
is
in
that?
the local plan itself.
But
Have
CD31
information that
will
would
have,
immediately be out of date after a year.
but there are these kind of documents are often included. I've seen them where the strategic sites, the anticipated delivery is included in the appendix. So that's a common code.
And it probably relates to how the review policies are worded as well, because I think one of them at least specifically refers to the trajectory, I think, in the plan, isn't it? So I think it probably will come up in discussions.
Yeah, exactly.
It's definitely in
Yeah,
terms of
yeah,
whether that's
yeah.
enough detail to be able to have as part of the review mechanism. Yeah.
Requiring just for how the trajectory, but how to actually set that here is happening.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, we can't see why you wouldn't. That information is now published and exists. So in due course, if anybody wants to scrutinise this type of thing, you have the data there and included in the plan wouldn't give it any policy status or otherwise. It would just be volume of information. I just don't really understand why you would include it in the plan because you wouldn't be putting it in with a view to say giving it any sort of policy status or otherwise. It'd just be an appendix with a load of information. If that information already exists and is published, so putting it in the plan doesn't change its status in that regard.
And it will be out of date after a year. It will be out of date.
Just because we have to monitor, publish, updated.
Yeah.
We have separate requirements beyond the plan, national policy, etc., to monitor and publish up-to-date information regarding our various different requirements. So that would be required to continue to do. So basically, why putting it in the plan doesn't achieve anything.
Well, sorry, there's a case law that suggests that a decision maker should make a decision based on what's in the plan and that they shouldn't have to go stuff like routing through examination libraries to find published documents. So therefore, we're in a situation where, as I say, in 4 or 5 years' time, when we've got, if DS7 is triggered or arguments being made that it's triggered, we've just got no way of judging whether our sites have come forward as anticipated or not. And that's the situation that we've had with the free appeals this year, is the discussion with regards to the engagement of DSA as it is now. And it would have been very helpful to have had a side-by-side evidential analysis of each site.
As far as I understand, the council have done CD31, which is kind of brought everything up to a level which is informed this examination. The council is saying in DS7 that it will continue to update that information, and so that information will be updated, but the information is not in the plan, it's in supporting documents which will be updated. It's correct, Mr. Compass, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, what DS7 is saying, you monitor things against your trajectory, which the up-to-date trajectory is the one containing the graph we referred to. It distills all that information into a simple form to follow, and we then publish and monitor our data on an annual basis, and that is that published data is what you would then judge things against, and it's going to be a constantly evolving feast on a year-by-year basis, and putting in the plan just doesn't change that. You'd still be looking at the relevant year-on-year data whenever you wanted to understand where you were at any given point in time.
I mean, the thought is, if they wish, they can put things in the plan, but we're concerned just with soundness, and I've not heard yet a soundness reason why these providing plans and modification.
I suppose it will come to whether or not it can be satisfactorily reviewed, which is a matter of separate.
Okay. This wasn't fun.
So I think I can help you on your points there. It's just an observation. It's not uncommon following the conclusion of examinations for material to be taken down from council websites. And often a lot of this very important evidence base might be lost in the evening order. I take the point that the council will be updating this trajectory on an annual basis. But I think perhaps Mr. O'Brien's point here as well, do we need to sort of see how the council has been performing and do that over time? So even, for example, in 4 years' time, we want to look back and see how the council's projections for each of those sites have come to pass, or whether there's been a variation from that. It is a helpful bit of contextual information. Now, so I'm not saying it needs to be in the plan itself, but perhaps we can just ensure that it is at least publicly available in perpetuity until the next plan is brought forward. Is that a different way around that?
I'm not sure it's a sound. We can only do with soundness. I'm not sure it's a soundness point now. I'm sure you've all downloaded a PDF version of it anyway, which will bring out in 3 years' time. But it's not. I don't think it's a soundness point. I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's a soundness point that that is a matter for us.
All I'm looking at, I think, is the future scenario in the context of DSO and how it's reviewed. And I take the point, it doesn't naturally sort of fit within the sound.
But paragraph 74 of the framework, strategic policy should include a trajectory illustrating the expected rate of housing delivery over the time period. I mean, you've done that. So, as far as we say, considering that's sufficient for sound, but also falls off really.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I understand the point. Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. We don't have any more questions on part D, so thank you. Obviously, there will be some maths that we've got later when we come to FA7. It's now 12:10. We can't bring forward, can we, Helen, this afternoon?
You'd have to contact them and see if they could.
Different people.
Two more.
Mr. Crampton's here, you're
Yeah.
down.
Oh,
So I think
oh, is it just Stacey Green
Stacey
then?
Green, yeah.
I can send her an email and see.
And where is she from, Helen?
Stokeford.
Stowford.
Okay.
Everyone else is here, I think.
Yeah, they are.
She won't be here for DS7 though, will she?
Yeah.
She?
Well, it's doing both, isn't it, the monitoring, so she's here for this session,
Which is
probably the estimates. Yes. And maybe some of the monitoring tables.
I just wondered whether we could.
I've got a phone number. Do you want me to quickly try and phone
You
her?
can bring it forward.
And what time would you
I
say?
mean, we're here all day, so
1:30?
Yeah.
if it's possible to reach 1:30, then
She's in Birmingham, so it's not.
So yeah, we'll just amuse ourselves 5 minutes.
Just put it on speakerphone, Helen.
Yeah.
Shall I stop recording?